We're used to seeing ABC News chief international correspondent James Longman reporting from all over the world, but now he's here to talk about his inner world and his family history in his new book, The Inherited Mind. And James is joining us this morning on this side of the pond. It's so great to see you. Thank you for coming in. Of course, this is a deeply personal story, incredibly powerful. Why did you decide to share this with everyone else?
I've always known this was the book I was going to write. This was my family story. It's something I've carried with me my whole life. My father had schizophrenia, and he ended his life when I was 9 years old. His brother had schizophrenia. My grandfather also ended his life. My mother has clinical depression, and I have had depression in my life. And all that, people at home that will feel that sounds very sad. The whole idea of the book is to give people hope, because I have bucked a trend, if you like. And so I want to give people some hope around their own family situations. The genetics of mental illness is really complicated, but I've wondered my whole life, is it written into my code? Was this inevitable? Was this always going to happen to me? And really, I also wanted to find out more about my dad, because there's so much shame and secrecy. People don't talk about this stuff.
Yeah, it sent you on such an investigation and a journey. So in The Inherited Mind, you talk a lot about those genetics, but also there's this idea of intergenerational trauma. And that's not necessarily genetic, but you trace that back to your grandfather. So what is that trauma, and how do you work with it?
Yeah, it's a really fascinating area of science, and the book deals with a whole series of research efforts that have been made into this. It's looked at Holocaust survivors, how children of Holocaust survivors can feel trauma, women who are pregnant during 9/11. It's all around cortisol levels. We get injected with too much cortisol, unable to regulate our cortisol as we get older. And I explain how if you have a genetic predisposition to something like this, which I do, then maybe early life stresses will mean that you deal with trauma for the rest of your life. So it was really important for me to give people some hope if they have these issues in their families, that this is surmountable. You can get past it.
As a mother, I can only imagine how proud your mom must be of you, not only for your reporting, but for sharing your story in this way. And there's a beautiful chapter written by your mom. What did you learn from her words?
Wow.
Yeah, look, when someone ends their life in a family, there's the objective truth of what happens, and then there's the law, there's the story they tell of it. And often that becomes more important than the actual objective facts. And it was really important for me to get multiple perspectives on this event in our lives, because my mother never really explained it to me. And honestly, my relationship with her really deteriorated after my father died. And people will find this, people watching at home, if they've had suicide in the family, they'll know that other relationships of those who are left behind are really damaged. So the book really is a process of me healing my relationship with her getting her say on what she had to deal with, married to a man with schizophrenia. And I have never really understood what my mum went through, so this was about making sense of that as well.
Has this helped your relationship with her?
I hope it will. It's tricky, and people will wonder when reading the book. I mean, she really suffered, and I think she transferred her suffering onto me for a long time. And I hope so. I hope she can read it and maybe understand me a bit better as well.
One thing that fascinates me by it is all the research that you did in digging into this. And you talked about this earlier, about finding that piece of hope, right? So what specifically do you look to, and what did you find in the research that we can look to for that hope?
You will have a genetic predisposition to a mental illness if you have a family history like mine. You just will. Your genes, it will be written in your code. But that is only 2% of your genetic inheritance. The other 98% is the software. It's how that code is read. That's epigenetics. You can turn your genetic predisposition up or down. It's like a dimmer switch. There are chemical processes in your body, which means that a genetic predisposition is not a prison. It's actually an opportunity to change your life. Genetics can really give you some hope about changing these patterns. It's not the thing that's going to hold you back. It's actually the thing that's going to propel you forward.
Wow.
So I want people to know that if they've got these histories in their families, they shouldn't be worried.
That's so fascinating. So what about your own mental health, James? How do you work with it? How do you make sure that you're keeping on top of it?
The thing I really understood with researching my father and really thinking about my own life was it's about community. You have to surround yourself with people you love and who love you. You cannot be isolated. People with significant mental illnesses often get cut off from the family. It's precisely that which will make it worse. So for me, my husband, my family, understanding that I can build a family of my own despite the fact that I had a rough time maybe growing up, that's what helps me. And communicating, telling people when you're feeling it, you've got to explain what's going on in your life. It's like a pressure valve. It's so freeing. That's the key to getting over depression. telling people how you feel.
What was the hardest part of this process for you in this book?
I think reading my father's medical notes. I got 120 pages of his medical notes, which was unbelievable. But I actually read the words he said when he was in psychosis. It's really difficult to read. He was in these crazy manic episodes. So that was really hard. But I also tracked down the people who looked after him from these notes. I found them.
Wow.
One of his carers came to my home. And because I look like him, I mean, that's the whole basis of the book, right? I look like this guy. I have his eyes, his nose, but what else do I have? I opened the door and she just knew who I was because she remembered my dad. She gave me a big hug and she could tell me that he really wanted to be in my life. And I never knew that.
Wow.
Right? And it was amazing for me to have that connection with her.
Well, James, we're huge fans of yours as a colleague, as a journalist, as a person, and this book, too. Tapping into something that I think so many people can connect to, and so many people are seeking answers and trying to have these discussions with their families. So thank you so much for bringing that to us.
Thank you for
Thanks, guys.
sharing.
Thanks for having me.
All right, of course, The Inherited Mind is available in stores and online. And if you or someone you know is struggling with thoughts of suicide or other mental health crises, there is free confidential help. It's available 24/7. You can call or text the National Lifeline at 988.